Start sharing my screen, I hope. And let's get this presenting. All right. So this is Tracing, Tools, and Tagliente, 16th century instructions for pattern transfer. So at the beginning of, again, I am a research nerd. My major research freak is a model booker, which are 16th century pattern books that were published by the publishing industry, primarily in Venice and in Germany. There were literally, we know of at least 150 different editions. Well, 150 different books in multiple editions. Each edition is normally at least 100 books, sometimes 400 if it's a big edition. So these were everywhere. We have quite a few that survive in bits and pieces, because bits and pieces are what happens when you use a book. And these were made to be used. They were intended to be pattern books that you could take the pattern from and either use it yourself, give it to your embroiderer, give it to your goldsmith, give it to whoever it is, and say, I want this pattern, and they would have it. And so then they would need to take that pattern and transfer it. And there are multiple ways of doing it. These right here are two different, frontispieces, the title pages of two different books. And if you look at these, you can see here we are embroidering, but this is the one I find most intriguing and interesting. Over here, we have this lovely person who is transferring, who's got a candle underneath their slate frame and transferring their pattern on. We have another one over here where again, we are starting to poke the holes in, and we will get to just exactly what those are in a minute. This is from another presentation, so I'm going to probably skip through the first couple of slides pretty quickly. There are 1,300 different publishers. That's right, 1,300 different presses publishing in 16th century Venice, Italy, with a third of those in Venice. All kinds of different how-to books are coming out, and ornament and embroidery books are a big part of that. The individual who wrote this first one, okay, let me back up. Most of these books that come out just have patterns. They don't have how to use the patterns or anything else. There is, however, the first pattern book that is published in Italy was published by Giovanni Antonio Tagliente, and his actually has instructions. The big reason that at least I think his book has instructions is that Tagliente was a teacher. This is 3 classics of Italian calligraphy. And one of the books in here is by Giovanni Antonio Tagliente. And this is his first love, is calligraphy and writing. He was a writing master. He was actually the writing master in Venice for 10 years, working in the court. Previous to that, he had traveled around Italy for 20 years as a master of writing and taught. So this is a teacher. He's gone into publishing and different options, but to begin with, he is a teacher. And so I find that probably the biggest reason that he chooses to put instructions in his book. One of the, these are his other books, which also kind of give some explanations. The first one is his writing book, and then he's got a book on how to do the Compagnomento di Arithmetica, is a double entry accounting book. He's got the Opera Amorosa, which is how to write love letters book. He also has the Libro Mestrevole, which is his book aimed at women and servants to teach them how to read. And it gives, basically it's sort of a hooked on phonics kind of a thing, where if you work through the exercises and do them 20 minutes a day, at the end of it, you will be able to read the vernacular. So, and then this last book, Essampli Ricami, is his embroidery book. Previous to Tagliente, about the only explanation we have on how to transfer patterns comes from Il Libro d'Arte by Cennino Cennini from the 1400s. And his is aimed at artists. And it says, you go and you get your embroiderers to put your cloth on or fine silk on stretchers and stretch it out. Then you take your charcoals and draw whatever you please. Then take your pen and ink and reinforce it. Then take a small, rather blunt miniver brush, sorry about the dip it in the ink, and after squeezing it out well, you begin to shade with the darkest places coming back and softening. So you have an artist who starts and they take their pen and ink, and then they go back in with their brush and add their details. And that's the first explanation we have on how embroidery patterns get onto anything. Past that, the next explanation we have is from Tagliente. Here we have one of the pictures I showed you before, which this lovely lady is pouncing this pattern onto her fabric. She's got a pounce bag, and she's putting charcoal onto her pattern, which has little holes in it, and transferring it through. And I will show you how to do that in a few minutes. First of all, I'm gonna show you in slides that I worked up really quick quite a while back. It's not my finest version of it, but that way you can see it really quick, and then we'll actually do it with the other camera on here, so that you can actually hopefully see what's going on. All right, so actually go back. There actually are some, there is an English translation. Actually, there are now 3 English translations of Tagliente. I started out not being able to find an English translation, even though every lace book and embroidery book told me that Tagliente had instructions on how to do this, and then they would tell me that, and I could never find the instructions. So I decided to go ahead and translate it, and I was working on a paper that I was writing for a conference, and in the midst of it, a researcher that I find really amazing, Helen Huff, she's outstanding, asked me what my abstract was, and I told her, and for some reason she decided to do her own translation at the time. So that is available, and it is available in archive, and I can give you the link to that. Additionally, this is my translation, and there is an additional translation. Oops, that is available. It is part of this book right here, which was published in only 500 copies, which is probably why I didn't know that it existed. The outer cover is hand-woven silk with Tagliente's name on it. And it is by Stanley Morrison, who is one of the typographers who actually developed Times New Roman. So he's super interested in typography, and as such, he was interested in the italic of Tagliente. And as part of that, he went ahead and published this book, which is on the embroidery book, sort of, kind of, maybe. It's more focused on the typography, but there is a partial translation of Tagliente's Essampli Ricami in here. It's just not listed anywhere. So there are 3. There is this one, there's Helen Huff, and I did one as well. And then I've gone through and reoriented a few of them. But the translation is, you can fold the pattern in half or quarters and rearrange your design according to what is needed. You can pencil in adjoining squares below and above the pattern and ensure the pattern is flat. Then you pierce the pattern with a needle. You should notice that the fold of the chart you have outlined is half the pattern. When you open the chart, the design will be composed of 2 mirror images neatly whole because of that fold. The pattern can now be dusted in any place you want for sewing, embroidery, embroidering, painting, and depending on what you desire. So that's his first bit of how-to. And his next, as you know, ingenious readers, anyone who wants to learn a new task or any desired activity and does not have any equipment suitable to the activity will never be able to start. And so he is talking to you about tools. And so he goes and discusses the tools, and these are the tools he shows. So this is the real quick walkthrough, and then I will actually show you how to do a pattern transfer. This is a page from Tagliente's Essampli Ricami, which was a book published in 1524 of embroidery patterns. It is the first published Italian book of embroidery patterns. So what I did was I picked an embroidery pattern that, well, I picked one that was really simple is what I did. I picked the simplest one I could come up with. I picked it, I printed it, because I didn't want to destroy my book, so I just put it on my printer, because conveniently both the Met and the French National Library have copies of Tagliente that are available for free. And those links are on my page, which is Model Book Muse. They will soon be on my website, which is just modelbook, modelbuch.com. And I'll also, this handout is also available in the Google Doc in the Google spreadsheet for the Artemisia Collegium. It's under class details, and this whole presentation is there. So, cut out my little bit here, and then I took my needle and I poked my holes. You can see as we flip it over, there's the holes showing. And then I had quilt pounce at my house, so I used quilt pounce. I would not normally do this, and I would certainly not use this size, but that's what I had in the middle of the night when I was throwing this together the first time last year. So first thing you do is you, as he said, you stretch your fabric. Yes.
Damn it.
Hello?
I can't hear what's going on.
What's going on?
What?
My classes I'm taking, this is online.
Okay.
It's arts and sciences.
Just a second. Let's see.
Why does everybody have to follow me? Thank you.
Okay. So you stretch your fabric, and then you take your pounce, and it, like I said, with the light blue of the quilt pounce, it doesn't show very well. So I will show you a little bit later. Once we get through this, I'm going to do it with regular charcoal, which is what I normally use. But it comes through. You can see the pattern there, and then you take your ink and you paint it to maintain your bit. You can still see there's still a little bit of the blue there, which wipes off as time goes by. And then this rest of it is just the translation. See if there's anything else here we need. Nope, not right now. So we will stop sharing. Okay. So, okay. So what I'm going to do over here is show you how Okay, show you how I do a pattern transfer. This is the pattern I'm currently working on. It really wants to be slow. Let's see if this helps. This is the pattern I'm currently working on. I'm doing a camicia and I'm embroidering it. This one it's got holes in it currently. So what I'm gonna do is take this, which is the rest of the pattern that I'm not currently using, and we'll start with that, just to show you the basics on how it goes. Okay, so Tagliente says to use a needle, and I used a needle on the last one. It's really easy to do it that way. You just need to make sure that your needle is large enough to go through to allow your chalk or your charcoal to go through. I actually prefer to use, this is a bobbin lace pricker. So it's basically a needle in a handle. You can order those, or this is a pin vise, which is exactly that. It's a little vise. You can order them. You could I think you can actually get them at Harbor Freight. They're not quite this pretty or small, dainty, but they still work fine. It's a little vise, and you can attach whatever size needle you want to it. So that's an option as well. Likewise, you can just use the embroidery needle. And then what you're gonna do, this is my lap desk. I normally have it, oops, sorry. Normally have it on my lap. I'm building sorry about that. I am building a lap pillow to work on, but this is what I currently work on. It's just a hard surface, and this is a couple of layers of wool. You can do it on whatever you want. I like this. It just seems to work for me to give me a little bit of gushy space, I guess, squishy stuff. So what you're gonna do for your pattern, for pricking and pouncing, is you're just going to take your pattern and you're gonna prick it. You're going to work along your lines and just make small dots. It's honestly that simple. You just follow your lines. You can already see this is starting. Oops, you see that? Yeah, my lines are starting to come through. And I would do the whole pattern. Once I've done that, I would take my fabric and stretch it. I do not plan to work this one on a frame. I'm going to work it in hand. So I'm going to transfer my pattern in hand so it doesn't distort. Because if I stretch it, it won't be quite what I want. So here's my already pricked pattern. Sorry to throw things around. I'm not trying to make anybody ill. Here's my already pricked pattern. Here's my piece of linen. That's not showing well. There we go. You could tape it in place, which is what I normally do. I'm gonna weight it down a little bit, probably. Okay. This right here is charcoal. It's just this right here, ground up vine charcoal that you get it at your art supply store. You can also order Pounce. Several embroidery spots carry it. I just happened to, this is available. I put it in my little thing so it stays there. Okay. You can use a Pounce bag. I am not using a Pounce bag because I have found that every time I use a Pounce bag, someone in my house decides it would be a really good idea to take that Pounce bag and put it somewhere else, or otherwise use it on something. So I keep my charcoal in there, and then I use these. These are just Stencil Daubers. All it is a small piece of fluffiness on the end of a stick. You can make these with little bits of, I know needle and thread. Mary just has taken and like the self-stick pieces that you find to put on the bottom of chair legs, and she's put those on a pretty, like one of the peg guys that you can buy at the craft store, so that she has just something to hold on and something that will transfer that the charcoal. Then you take your charcoal, take your dauber into your charcoal, you put it over your pattern, and you just rub. Circles seem to work really well, just because it transfers better that way. And I obviously should not be doing this with the charcoal in the middle of my fabric, which is not what I would normally do, but that's what's happening today. Then I would remove my pattern. And normally I would be pressing a little bit harder and paying more attention to what I was doing, but you can still see that, for instance, here's this little bit here that corresponds to that little flower there. So my pattern has come through. Then, if I am not being historically accurate, I will normally take a micron or other permanent marker and trace that and keep it on, because I am not really great with my ability to have non-shaking hands and fine motor control. So normally I would use that, but because we are doing historically accurate pattern transfer, what I would do, take my brush and a little water, whoops, and a little watercolor. And then just follow my lines. And my pattern is transferred. And that is the some extent of it. It is not at all difficult. It's a great way to transfer something exactly. And it is totally documentable to 1524. It was probably used previous to that, but that is the first explanation we have of it printed thus far. All right, let's turn this off. Okay. Any questions? Anything I can answer or talk about?
I don't know if you can see the chat, Hastings, but people are asking what kind of watercolor, why watercolor other than ink?
You can use ink. I use watercolor because it's gouache. Because that's the description given when I first did it. I did it with that. I've also used lamp black carbon. I'm using watercolor because that's what I'm currently using for other things right now. You can use ink if you choose to, and Tonini certainly talks about ink. And when I'm doing it not with the painting of it, I use the archival ink. Part of it, honestly, is because the Royal School of Needlework does it with watercolor. So when I first learned to prick and pounce, that's how I learned to prick and pounce. And then I learned that it was documentable and to go back and play with it. Yes, all of the paint is covered by your stitches. If it isn't, that's also totally documentable as well. We have pieces of extant embroideries where the artist and or the pattern went one way and the embroiderer went another, and we can still see the ink. There are also examples of basically kits, sort of, for jackets and coifs where they were printed by printers on their printing press with the pattern and sold that way. And some of them have been stitched where they show, where you can still see bits and pieces of the ink. But yes, the idea is that you would cover the ink with your stitching. And yes, the original pattern is destroyed by using it for pricking. We have several of the, there's actually a fabulous study of it, but a good portion of the extant books we have, even that have been rebound and stuff, have examples of pricked patterns within them, which is also why most of the books that we have are not complete. They were intended to be consumables. So yes, it does destroy your pattern for pricking it. You can use it multiple times. Any other questions? I know this one's a real fast one because most of the stuff I've got is on how I translated it and the translation itself. The actual activity of doing a pattern transfer with prick and pounce it's the simplest thing available. I mean, it just does not take very long. It works for those of us that are, you know, kind of dumb. I'm really not great at you know, doing these intense this and this and this. This one's a super simple thing. But the great thing about it is once it's on there, you can then work on your piece and you don't get frustrated while transferring it over. Any other questions? Alrighty, it looks like we're gonna do a half an hour. Thanks for coming, guys. Let me get the sheet is actually, I guess Vadoma did put it up there. So yes, the Google Doc for signing in is up there. Okay, the books I mentioned. This right here is a copy of Tagliente's Essamplario Nuova. It is a book of patterns. This right here is the 1872 reprint. It is currently available. I spent a lot of time over the last few years putting together where to find these. If you're interested in that, going through and looking at the pattern books themselves, I have a Facebook. It's Model Book Muse, and that's where I put. I've been studying these. There's 150 pattern books. I've been going through and finding matches for patterns in extant objects and portraits, talking about the patterns, and also finding where to find the books. The Met has a copy of Tagliente. There's also one in Archive. I think it's the Clark Library's copy is on there. But it is Giovanni Antonio Tagliente. But all these are so these are his instructions. And past that, it is simply patterns. This is the pattern that I used. It's just different examples of patterns for use by artisans. Gold workers, metal workers, woodworkers, painters, primarily embroiderers are mentioned quite frequently. And they are just examples of patterns. And most of them are just like this, where it's just pages and pages of images.
Are those simple patterns in there?
There's all kinds of patterns in here. There's weaving type patterns. There's larger. There are some simple. I think he's got. These are some of the simpler ones right here. I've used some of these for pattern darning. They can be used for weaving. I've seen them used for pulled work, needlepoint. They don't specify what you use the patterns for. And that's how all of these books are. Some of them are, when you look at them, they are quite obviously blackwork patterns or quite obviously lace patterns. But on the whole, most of them can be used for a variety of things and have been. For instance, like this roundel here, I've seen it worked up in period. I've seen it worked up on a wall. I've seen it worked up in terracotta. I've seen it done as a Majolica plate. So the patterns were used for all kinds of different purposes. And some of them are more simple and some of them are less simple. Tagliente's, he's kind of moving from printing, so his are a little bit more, less embroidery-like, more, I mean, you can embroider these, but it's a kind of a bridge, because he's the first Italian book. And then they kind of settle in a little bit more and you'll see more blackwork patterns and things like that in them. Peter Quentel, Schoensberger, there's all kinds of them. But yeah, I have those. I have a lot of them listed at Model Book Muse, and I have on my old blog, Daughter of the Bull, there's a model book list page, but I'm currently in the midst of moving that over to modelbook, modelbuch.com, and I'll have the full list. At this point, I've found about 112 of 150 of the extant books that we know of available online for free. So there's a few that are only published, and there's a few that I haven't found yet. But they are very, very available if you want to do embroidery in the 16th century, you can find the same patterns that the people in period were using. So, difference in technique between doing this for fabric and doing it in woodworking? No, there's not. Painters were using it on canvas as well. It's the same pricking and pouncing. You're still going to use your charcoal. You might use a different medium to mark it at the end, but in most cases, no. You're just gonna take your transfer, put it on, and then make it stick. So, however that last phrase does. I'm currently, which I don't have with me, I'm currently working on a piece, a box top, and I just did it exactly this way with the charcoal and the gouache, and it's working fine. And thank you. I try hard with the site, so. Yes, you pre-prick the pattern. You don't prick over top of your ground piece. No, you do it completely beforehand. Like I said, I do it on kind of a squishy, soft surface, so there's a little bit of give to it, so I'm not dulling my needle. But yeah, you do it separately. You do it beforehand, and then you take it and put it on your ground piece. Just like I'm going to use this as a collar, so I'm probably going to repeat this 6 or 7 times, or got a big neck. So I'm going to repeat it multiple times, and I'm going to use the same pattern. I'm just going to transfer it, move it over, transfer it, move it over, transfer it. Yeah, you can reuse them, and they are pre-pricked. Any other questions? Alrighty, we are going to have court at about 6 o'clock. So if people want to head over that way, get ready for it, whatever. I'm going to hang out here for a minute in case anybody needs anything, but I am turning the recording